Gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Gottheimer, who is also the Vice Chair of the Subcommittee, National Security, International Development, and Monetary Policy, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Chairman, the most recent Consumer Price Index report indicated that the largest component of the CPI, shelter owned and rented, has increased 5.5% since last year. Estimates I've seen show apartment rental costs up 15% or more over the last year. Do you believe the CPI measure of shelter costs understates the actual increase in housing costs? And do you have any suggestions for actions Congress can take to lower housing costs for Americans in the short and long term?
There's some sense in which it might understate costs because it's not capturing leases that haven't turned over yet, right? So it's really looking at leases that are turning over.
So probably it's a higher rate.
Overall, we think it's a decent measure. It also remember that in the CPI, housing services has a weight that's double in the measure that we look at personal consumption expenditure inflation. We think that's a better, more sophisticated, a better representation of the inflation that's actually happening in people's lives. So we would tend to look at that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to shift to another issue that's covered in your June report. I've been engaged in discussions on cryptocurrency policy and have long warned that a run on stablecoin has the potential to stabilize financial markets. My concerns were realized in part last month when the so-called stablecoin terror collapsed. Your report highlighted the danger of that event and called for congressional action to protect consumers and financial markets. My draft legislation, the Stablecoin Innovation and Protection Act, would establish a definition and requirements for qualified stablecoin and define as cryptocurrencies redeemable one-to-one for U.S. dollars. This legislation would reduce financial instability in the markets and protect consumers and support innovation in fintech. It would create also a pathway for banks and non-banks to acquire qualified status for the stablecoins they issue. With federal oversight, do you believe non-bank entities can be reliable issuers of qualified stablecoins if they can prove they are fully backed by cash or cash equivalents?
So, as you know, we've recommended that Congress look at this, and there are many approaches, including yours. The President's Working Group did recommend that stablecoins be issued by insured depository institutions. I think it's great that Congress is looking at different approaches and evaluating those questions. What you really want, though, is you want to be sure that those entities are appropriately regulated, and in our view, in some sense, at the federal level. So, but I think that's going to be a question for Congress. You know what the PWG came up with, but I think there are different approaches.
Do you have any views on who the primary regulator should be at all? You think that's all up to Congress? Like, would the OCC would you have a problem with the OCC being a primary regulator?
For national bank charters, yes, but I mean, the thing is, stable coins are used now principally in the capital markets, as you know, around the platforms, the digital finance platforms, and that's more in the bailiwick of the SEC. If there were going to be payment stable coins, we should be involved, and if it's going to be about banks getting involved, it'll be the banking regulator. So I think it's going to be, we're blessed by a plethora of regulatory agencies in the financial sector, so that'll need to be sorted out.
Do you think that's something, given the challenges we've had in the last months, that's something we have to move quickly on? Are you concerned with how long it's taking Congress to actually act there?
I think it's very important. It's no different than any other big technological innovation. Airplanes, for example, there comes a point at which a new regulatory framework is needed to protect the public and create, preserve innovation and competition, foster, support all that. But that time is coming for digital finance, and I think I'm encouraged that there are now a bunch of bills and proposals, and that Congress is working on this. I think it's important that it get done quickly, because as we've seen, these companies can grow really quickly, and we've also seen that they can have reverses as well.
And you think overall the ideal role of the Fed in overseeing stablecoins is what? What ultimately you think long term? What's the role of the Fed?
Well, so the one question is around CBDCs, right? Is do we want a private stablecoin to wind up being the digital dollar? And I think the answer is no. If we're going to have a digital dollar, it should be done by us. We don't know that we need a digital dollar as such yet, but I think that it should be government guaranteed money, not private money that is really created for the benefit of the private issuer. So that's one thing. I think also we're very important in payments. So anything to do with payments that the public is involved in, we should be involved in that too.
Thank you so much. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The gentleman from Tennessee, Mr.